Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to today's Heritage Ohio webinar series webinar. Today's webinar is going to be over board development strategies and best practices. Today we're here with Cathy Ellen of Creative Option C Consulting here in Port Clinton, Ohio on the southwest shore of Lake Erie. Just an advisement before we get started. Our software we use, GoTo, has recently updated their software, so you may notice some changes to your webinar software. It may run a little bit differently today, so this is our first webinar with this new software running. So if you notice anything, just send a message to Devin, and I'll see if I can help you out. And I'll turn everything over now to Cathy.
Great. Thank you very much, Devin. I hope that my sound volume is okay, and if it isn't, please send a message to Devin and we will make the appropriate adjustments as we go. As Devin said, my name is Cathy Allen, and I do board development, strategic planning assistance, anything to help nonprofit boards be as strong and have as much capacity as they need to do the work they do. I have a large passion for this subject. I really like helping volunteer nonprofit board members being as effective as they can be, and I also have a passion for what Main Streets do, so I honor all of you for the work that you're doing, and I hope that you get something out of today's presentation that you can use to make your organization as strong as possible. I've got 3 goals for today's organization, 3 basic sections to the presentation. One, we're going to talk about the legal responsibilities of nonprofit board members for 501c3, C4 organizations incorporated in Ohio. Second, then we will talk specifically about Heritage Ohio's recommended best practices for board development and board governance. And then we'll do a case study using the Main Street Port Clinton as an example of some work done in board development and how they were able to make some changes that helped their organization a lot. We'll take questions between the sections, so Devin will help facilitate that as well. So going first to legal duties. I take the material in this section from a guide for charity board members that's published by the Attorney General of Ohio that was sent to you in about a half an hour ago, I guess. It's also available on the Attorney General's website. So the Attorney General has done a heck of a service for all of us by taking the material from Section 1702 of the Ohio Revised Code, the section that governs nonprofits in Ohio, and also the stuff from the IRS, the federal code, and put it into English so that we can all understand what our legal obligations are. There are 4 in Ohio. Some states have 3. Ohio has 4. And first among them is the duty of care. That is, as nonprofit board members, we have an obligation to read and understand the mission, vision, and governing documents of our organization. We have an obligation to attend board and committee meetings, to be informed about the decisions in front of us, and prepared to participate in decision-making and oversight. And we are to exercise the same care as a prudent person would in the handling of their own affairs. That means, in effect, that if you wouldn't do something with your own checkbook, you're not to do it with the checkbook of the organization where you serve. So obviously a prudent person, that could be a difference of opinion or subject to interpretation, but we have the duty to care when we're working in our capacity as nonprofit board members. We have a duty of loyalty. This is the conflict of interest stuff. The responsibility to be prepared to put the organizational objectives above our own self-interest. Boards should all establish and follow written policies concerning conflict of interest situations, those situations in which you have a financial interest in a decision that's before the board of directors. When that is the case, you have an obligation to disclose your personal financial interest and to recuse yourself from discussion or voting on that subject when it is before the board. So that is the duty of loyalty, and there is much more information about all of that and all of these subjects at that Attorney General website. Boards are also to avoid entering into business relationships between members of the board and the organization. This is not a strict prohibition. It is sometimes possible when some member of your board has a skill that you'd like to hire them to do for your organization. But in these cases, you want to make sure that you have consulted with an attorney and that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's and that you are doing everything on the up and up. All right, the third duty on nonprofit board members under Ohio law is the duty of compliance, and that is simply to understand and comply with the governing documents of your organization, including your bylaws and your code of conduct, and also to know and to comply with federal and state laws governing nonprofit corporations, including registration and reporting requirements. So we're going to give you some resources to make sure that you can look those up and that you are aware of all of the laws governing nonprofit organizations. And finally, in Ohio, we have the duty to manage accounts. We have a duty to develop policies that assure the financial responsibility of the organization, so that we have given as a board very clear directive to our staff concerning the way they are to handle the resources that are guaranteed by the taxpayers. We are to keep accurate and complete records of our income and expenses, our investments, and our minutes. So minutes aren't just a good idea, they're actually a requirement under law that we keep as members of nonprofit boards records of our activities. We have, under the duty to manage accounts, the responsibility to develop a budget, which is a blueprint for our program plans, and to make sure that all organizational spending is planned for according to our priorities, and to develop fundraising goals, and to assist the organization in acquiring adequate resources. Board members have an obligation when they set a budget to also participate in making sure that adequate resources exist so that organization can do what it needs to do to conduct its programs. So I'm going to stick on this slide for a minute and give people an opportunity to write those down. These are excellent resources of further information that's available to all of us. The Ohio Attorney General, which regulates nonprofits in Ohio, has not only that document that we sent to you, but they have video trainings, they have a library of other resources that are available, reading on specific issues, as does the Secretary of State, and the Internal Revenue Service as well, the irs.gov/charities. There's a wealth of information there, particularly as regards the 990 form, the tax return that nonprofits do, and that Section 4 that was implemented in 2009, which is sort of a checklist of best practices in financial management for nonprofits. So wealth of information there about how to make sure that you are in legal compliance as a nonprofit board manager. So before I go on to the board governance best practices, I'll check and see if there's any questions coming in on the legal stuff. No, we're good to go. All right. So that material can be a bit dry, but we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to understand the legal responsibilities on board members. I want to go further now and talk about board governance and the recommendations of best practices that come from that Downtown Ohio board member handbook. I understand that most of the people on the webinar today are staff of the nonprofits. And so here we're going to give you a smorgasbord of good ideas and best practices, not with the sense that you're going to go implement all of these things this month, but with the sense that if any of these things address a problem that you actually have, then here's a grab bag of ideas that you can take to your board and see if some of these might help. One of the first is to be really clear about your board composition and make sure that you have a diversity on your board. Heritage Ohio, Downtown Ohio Inc. talk about making sure that you have work, wisdom, and wealth on your board. You have a mix of people who are willing to do the work, who show up, help organize the event, help you in the office, do those things that need to be done in order to keep your organization going. Wisdom, people who have a variety of skills, people who have a variety of knowledge about your town, about nonprofit governance, about maybe that have connections, and also wealth, people who can themselves write a check to your organization, people who have friends who can write a check to the organization, people who have the ability to contribute. So Heritage Ohio absolutely recommends that every board be a mix of people from across sectors. And I want to show you an example of how this was done in Port Clinton. So quickly transfer over and show you a board matrix. This is an exercise that I strongly recommend as a board development person, that that is a high yield investment of time. Taking the time to put together something like this for your organization can yield big results, both in terms of making sure that you have a strong and diverse board capable of doing all of the things that you need your board to be able to do, but it also can be a heck of a recruitment tool, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So here's Port Clinton's, Main Street Port Clinton's example. In brainstorming, members of this board of directors listed out all of the characteristics that they wanted to have on the board, all of the different sectors from our community they wanted to have represented, all of the different skills. And we put those across the top part of this matrix. So we want to have someone who's good at legal. We wanted to have representation from the city of Port Clinton, people who had served on previous boards, people who have an interest in historic preservation, skills, grant writing and fundraising and project management. So they listed all of those characteristics, and then down the left side we have the names of our board members along with information about when their term expires, and we had them then fill in the X's, what can we put you down for, and when we looked at it we could see right away, you know, we have a bit of a gap. Perhaps we would benefit by having more folks in historic preservation. We would benefit by making sure we have someone in line from the legal perspective in case Rich Gillum should ever choose to leave the board. So we want to make sure that when we're recruiting now, we're able to go out and find someone who fills a specific skill set that we need. This actually aids recruitment in that instead of wondering now who can we find to serve on our board, we now know we're looking for something very specific, and that will expand our thinking. So for example, if we decided we wanted to find someone who was interested in historic preservation, we might approach the local historical society, we might approach the local library director, and in that way perhaps be introduced to people we wouldn't have known otherwise who were interested in historic preservation. Being introduced to new people helps us refresh our board. It also helps us when we're sitting down with that person to be very specific and clear about why we want them. We think that your interest in historic preservation will assist us with building our board capacity, and we need you in the following ways. So that is why I say this is a tool that can pay big dividends when it comes to identifying what gaps you have on your board of directors and where you can help. All right, so let me switch back now, back to the presentation. All right. All right, so board composition and board diversity. Of board responsibilities, a really tight presentation, so I'm happy to share it with you. They talk about board responsibilities in the area of policy administration, responsibility of every board to establish and to review all of those organizational policies, and I'll show you a list of what those might include here in a second. The finance responsibilities, again, approving and monitoring the budget, making sure that you're looking at those financial reports every month or every quarter as you decide in policy you want as a board to be looking at them, making sure that the spending for the organization is in alignment with your priorities. The other is to participate in fundraising. Downtown Ohio recommends that most Main Streets are fundraising organizations, and you need to have a requirement on board members that they are willing to participate in fundraising, however that works for them, whether that's being helpful at events, whether that's helping to introduce the organization to major donors, whatever it means for them, all board members should participate in fundraising. Board members have a responsibility for public relations, for making sure that you're relating the organization's programs to the public, that you know that 30-second spot that anytime you run into someone and you can talk about your service as a board member, you're able to say very quickly and confidently exactly what the organization does and why it is of value. and to be an advocate, to be a cheerleader for the downtown. If you're serving on the Main Street Board, you want to be able to be a cheerleader for the downtown and the value of doing that economic restructuring. Evaluation is an important responsibility on board members, making sure that you're monitoring the work of your organization, making sure that it is effective and that you know it's effective. And this is more and more and more required by grant funders. If you have any kind of grant, you know that when you're writing that grant request and when you're doing that grant report, they want to know how you measured for success. So as board members, being always able to ask, how do we know that our program is effective? And monitoring and making sure that it is a core function of your board. And then, of course, personnel, hiring, disciplining, evaluating your executive director or your program manager, also an important board function. So those are the 5 areas of responsibility for boards as a whole. There are also some individual standards for board members that are recommended by Heritage Ohio, and these are also very standard, but making sure that as an individual board member you support all board decisions. There may be times when you don't know or you don't really agree with the direction the board has taken, but you have an obligation as a board member to make sure that you are publicly supporting the board and its decisions. To participate, you have an obligation to participate on at least one committee, to attend board and committee meetings, again, to disclose your personal financial interests, and also to support the concept of board holism, and that is especially regarding staff. That concept is that it is only the board acting as a whole that can speak for the organization or direct staff. So this is the protection that you directors might need when you've got 8 board members who all have a different idea about what you ought to be doing today. Directors need to be able to take their direction from the board as a whole, not from individual board members. So board members ought to refrain from giving individual directives to staff. All right. So again, it's a best practice to make sure that you write up a board member position description and that you use it not only to make sure that everyone has the same expectation for what they're going to be doing as board members for your nonprofit, but it's also a recruitment tool. It helps you to be able to sit down when you're meeting with a prospective board member and tell them exactly what you're going to be asking them to do. There is a template for this in the board member handbook. And you can take that template and make changes to it according to your community's unique needs. So the commitment to the organization's mission and vision, just bullets in position description, that will be in compliance with bylaws and the policies, that you'll understand the role, that you participate in fundraising. If you're going to make that a requirement, spell that out in position description so that the board members have an opportunity to understand their expectations. Here is another high-yield investment of time, in my estimation, putting time into organizing a strong board member orientation as new board members come on, making sure that they understand the role and the expectations, and that they understand the organization. So I believe that this is best done peer-to-peer, board member to board member, so we know very often it's the staff who sit down with new board members to go through this information. But basics, who we are, what we do, what's our mission, what's our history, how did we come to be, but what are our role and responsibilities as an organization, as board members, what's the position description. Very, very helpful before someone's first board meeting to go over that budget with them, make sure they understand what your sources of income are, what you spend money on, how that all works together. Make sure they understand your organization's relationship to the various stakeholders. How do we relate to the city? How do we relate to the local business association? How do we relate to the chamber or to the Kiwanis or other organizations in our community? And give them a copy of that Main Street Board Member Handbook. That helps them understand your Main Street in the context of Ohio. I want to just direct you back to that Main Street Handbook. It contains a great deal of information, officer position descriptions, committee descriptions, and a great deal of information about that project manager, position description, and also tips for hiring. So make sure that you've got an updated version of that and that you're making use of it. All right. Obviously, all of you need to have a bylaws and a code of regulations. Those two expressions are interchangeable. Some organizations call them bylaws. Main Street tend to go with code of regulations. There's a number of things that need to be embedded within that code of regulations. Your organization's purpose, what you exist to do. Your program area, what are the boundaries of your downtown, what is the geographic area in which you work. Often very helpful to be able to share that information with someone who wonders why you're not doing more for them. Spelling out of your membership criteria and your membership meetings, when those membership meetings take place. Often a requirement that there be an annual meeting. The size of your board and the composition of your board could be spelled out in bylaws. You want to have some language in there about how you decide things, what is quorum for you, or how much in advance does information have to go out, whether you have to do it in a meeting or you can do it electronically, some information about how you decide things. And then a description of your committees and responsibilities of your officers. As a bonus for people on today's webinar, if you have bylaws that maybe you haven't looked at and refreshed in a while, my firm would be delighted to have a look, and so we'll make this offer. If you would like to send us your bylaws, we will have a look at them, talk to you about your organization's unique needs, and maybe provide some suggestions on ways to refresh that code of regulations. All right. Below the level of bylaws or code of regulations, there are a number of other board-level policies that I recommend you have in place. This is now not in your board member handbook, but this is something that I strongly recommend that all boards have in place, a board governance policy that spells out what are the responsibilities of the committees, what are the responsibilities of the board, anything sort of below the level of bylaws that helps you understand and keep everybody with the same level of expectation. Policy on planning, how is it you decide your programs and what you will be working on over the course of the next months and years. Again, a finance policy spelling out your audit requirements, your how much you'll keep in cash reserve, under what conditions you might have deficit budget, any decisions having to do with how you run your money and cash management can be written into a finance policy. Community relations policy, who speaks for the board, under what circumstances. Operations policy, this tends to be personnel stuff, but if you offer compensation for vacations and those kinds of things, you'd want to have that built into some sort of operations policy. And then again, obviously, your conflict of interest policy and making sure that all board members are aware of that and are prepared to adhere to it. You would also spell out in a conflict of interest policy what you would do if there was a suspicion that someone was in violation of your conflict of interest policy. All right. This isn't a surprise to anybody in the Main Street program, but standing committees for most Main Streets are in accordance with the 4-point approach. So you have promotion, the design, the economic restructuring, and the organization committees. And again, we'll stick with the slide for a minute. Here are some additional resources for all of you that are online. Wonderful libraries of further information about nonprofits. The Ohio Association of Nonprofits is a statewide membership organization, but they have a great deal of information on their website that is accessible even to non-members. We have 2 Centers for Excellence, one in Toledo and one in Akron. Those websites, again, have great libraries of information as well as, databases of consultants. And BoardSource is a national organization which has a library of articles and chat rooms and other resources for nonprofit board members. So recommend all of those resources. If you have specific questions about best practices or how folks in other places are doing things and having success, recommend going to those resources. All right, so I'll talk in a minute then about what we've done in Port Clinton. Then I'll stop and take questions. All right. All right, so no questions, Devin, and then we'll move on.
No questions.
No questions, all right. All right, I just want to talk for a little bit about a project that we worked on in Main Street, Port Clinton. This began with a grant that Main Street Port Clinton received in July of last year on a capacity building program from the Center for Nonprofit Resources in Toledo. They received $9,000. They were able to buy a laptop, but then also to hire a consultant, who was me, to conduct some board development training, including some specific training on how to be good fundraisers. And then also we did 2 strategic planning retreats with the board. This project included both internal and external assessments called environmental scans. So we interviewed and surveyed a lot of our stakeholders and also internally to see how we were doing, what were our strengths and weaknesses as an organization, and what would our stakeholders have us be focused on over the next couple of years. In the board development, this board got very busy over the course of a year. They did a lot of extra meetings, and in the course of these extra meetings, they were able to write that board member position description that's suitable for Port Clinton's unique characteristics. So using the template from the board member handbook, they were able to make some changes to it and make it specific to our area. They also developed a board matrix that I shared with you a minute ago. And they were able to recruit 3 new board members to fill in some gaps that they had identified along the way. So they developed an orientation program for new board members and designated a board member who's responsible for conducting those. As a group, they learned more about board roles and responsibilities. They developed skills as fundraisers and have been doing more in the fundraising area than they had in the past, which tended to be pretty much tied to one big event. They reviewed and revised their structure and responsibilities of the standing committees. They still have the 4 standing committees of Main Street. The organization committee's responsibilities were given to the executive committee. So the 4 officers meet monthly and take on those organization duties. They also added a standing committee for that big major fundraising event that we mentioned. They redeveloped and updated their own board manual, so all of those documents were reviewed and revised and collected and are available now to all of the board members, and they revised their bylaws and other policy governance documents. So they actually got quite a lot of work done in the course of a half a year. Later on this year, they'll conduct their first ever self-assessment of their own effectiveness as a board, and largely as a result of this work, MSPC did receive its national accreditation this year. When it had its Main Street review, or its Heritage Ohio review last year, one of the things that was found to be weak in was this area of planning and having active, strong committee structure. So by addressing themselves directly to that, they were able to turn that around and receive their accreditation. They also had a very strong strategic planning component to the work that they did last year. They revised their mission statement. They created a vision statement for the organization. For those who may be interested to know, to this consultant, every consultant will give you a different definition. I think of a mission statement as your reason for existence, and a vision statement is a picture of some future point of how things will be if you achieve your mission. So they did both of those documents. They established some strategic priorities for the next 3 years. This is a group of people who want to do it all right now, and they needed to pick some strategic direction and focus their efforts at just a few things. Then they established annual goals for 2011 and completed some timelines and committee-by-committee work plans. So there's a new Main Street Port Clinton mission statement, striving to promote, preserve, and improve downtown Port Clinton as a vibrant center for businesses, entertainment, and cultural activities for residents of the community and visitors to the area. This took not as much time as it did to write it originally. There were just some edits done this time, but it was an opportunity for the board members to refresh it and to recommit to the mission of the organization. The vision statement that they were able to write together, they're very proud of. We think this paints a very wonderful picture, and we hope that all of you who see it will look forward to visiting us sometime in Port Clinton this summer. Accessible by water or land, downtown Port Clinton, a popular destination on Lake Erie, is a thriving community, welcoming residents and visitors alike. Enjoy the unique shops, excellent restaurants, year-round entertainment, and cultural activities located within the beautifully restored historic downtown business district. Those of you who know Port Clinton know that this is a vision statement, because this is a statement of we would like to have a downtown marina, and so that we can say that we are accessible by water. having those restaurants, having year-round entertainment. Year-round is something special to Port Clinton. It tends to sometimes be sort of seasonal in terms of people going in and out of our stores in downtown. So very, very proud of this organization, and I hope that they are reading their vision statement at every board meeting and that they're keeping it in their minds as they're going about their daily tasks. Just to mention that they did establish strategic goals, and any of these, Laura Schlachter, who's the program manager here in Port Clinton, has said that she'd be willing to make available to folks if they really want to see them. You know, to set strategic goals and to come up with a document that has 11 goals on it is not something any can see a group do, but in this case it truly did make sense because we chose goals for each of those committees. So there's one master overarching program goal and one master overarching institutional goal, which had to do with development of the board and growing it and diversifying it. So then each of the board's goals is further broken down into action steps, designation of responsibility, and timelines, by which we mean we have clearly written down who is going to do what by when. And that is how the program manager is able to hold board members accountable for taking ownership of the parts of tasks that they planned for when they established their plan last year. All right, so that's how you reach me. Anybody who wants to take me up on the offer to review your bylaws, please do feel free to call or to send them directly to me at that email address or that phone number. Again, I really honor all that you all do out there. I think that this is important work, and if there is anything that Creative Options can do to assist you in that, we would look forward to having that opportunity. So thank you all again for listening, and again, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. If anyone has any questions, please send them to me. That's Devin Miles, the organizer on your screen, and I'll happily have Kathy answer those for you. I'll just take a second to say thank you, everyone, for attending today. Heritage Ohio exists to save the places that matter, build community, and help individuals live better. If you enjoyed today's webinar, please think about becoming a member of Heritage Ohio. You can visit us at our website at heritageohio.org. And we'll give it a few minutes. If any of you have any questions, send them on over to me. It's Devin. And if not, we will end early today and hope you all have a good day. All right, then. I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so we will sign off today. And thank you again for attending today, and thank you, Cathy and Creative Options Consulting for participating today and agreeing to help us out with informing our audience base a little more about board development and consulting on that. And no questions yet? Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for coming today. And our next webinar is on July 11th. And that will be over setting up a 501c3 organization. Thank you.